Hi, everybody. This is Hondo Carpenter. It's great to be with you today. Whenever you're watching this, I know it is super early in the morning. I'm just checking right now. It is about 2 o'clock, but I appreciate you all being with us. Thank you for joining us today. We have a lot of information that we're going to get into. As you know, just a few hours ago, the schedule was released. We knew who the Raiders were going to play, but we didn't know when. And you can't really make even though it's a way too early prediction, you can't make something that's at least somewhat grounded in relevance if you don't know when. I mean, if you don't know, how the schedule is playing out. I'll get into that a lot more as we go today. So, a reminder, and because we've grown so much over the last several years, if you're new to this, I will make a prediction, which I made last night, and I'll make today on the podcast for all 17 games. That's just my initial prediction. Then I'm going to go through and dig deeper into every team. And then right after training camp, when we see injuries, we watch how guys perform, all that kind of stuff. I'll make my final prediction before the season starts. And that's the one that I'm held accountable to. This is my fifth year covering the Raiders. The first year I was off by one game, nailed it. Second year was right on the money. Third year I was horrible, absolutely horrible. And I've owned it. I will own it. And then last year got back to within one game. I had a couple of different scenarios in this one, and then I try to average them out. But again, my one before the season will be that'll be have all the final tweaks just going into the year, some trades that maybe other teams have made or the Raiders have made, or maybe some guys really performed well. Maybe there were some big injuries in training camp or lack of, but we'll get into all that again. That's the week before training camp will be my final one. So let's start out week one. They play September 8th at the Chargers at 4:05. Now, let me just say a couple of things here. I have for years said if the Chargers had better coaching, that they would be a force to be reckoned with because there was a lot of talent. Tom Telesco accumulated a lot of talent. I said that. I own it. I think Jimmy Harbaugh is a great coach. I don't think he's a good coach. I think he's a great coach. I have tremendous respect for Jimmy. And before you say, well, you're from Michigan, it has nothing to do with it because I'm a Spartan. He's a Wolverine. But I have tremendous respect for Jimmy, really his entire family, good people. And I think he's going to do an exceptional job. He inherited a team that, had lost a lot of players because of where they were in salary cap. They had moved all in for last year, try to make a big run. So there's a lot of new players. I think that this is going to be a year of getting some stability under them. I think they're going to be a much better team at the end of the year than they are at the first. But I also feel that way about the Raiders. I just think there's a lot of new that's going to have to be assimilated. And I think this is going to be a I don't think rebuilding is the term, although that's what they're doing. I think in the NFL concept, rebuilding means tearing everything down, and they're certainly not doing that. They certainly have taken some things away. But I think Justin Herbert is a good quarterback. I have yet to see anything from him that convinces me that he is absolute elite. So, as you know, I use the saying a lot, and I got this from an NFL general manager. 8 of the NFL teams feel like they have a quarterback that they can absolutely go win a Super Bowl with. 8 have a quarterback they think they can win a Super Bowl with, and 16 are looking for a quarterback. I believe that the Chargers 100% think they have a quarterback that can win them a Super Bowl. But I don't think that they have him in the top group where they know that he can. I 100% believe that. I'm not in that group yet that's been convinced about Justin Herbert. I'm just not there yet. And so we're watching him closely. And I think the Raiders, again, this is week one, and they go down to Allegiant Stadium West, and I think they get a big win down there over the Bolts, a big and impressive win to start the season 1-0. Then I think week two, they head out to Baltimore. This is going to be a very difficult game, but to go across all of the time zones to the east and to plan an early game is just very difficult and against a very good team. I think this is going to be an interesting game. I think it's going to be a real defensive battle. I don't think that I'm not saying Baltimore has the Raiders defense, but I don't think they're bad. But I think everything goes into it. I think the Raiders lose. And so they're 1-1 right there. Week 3, they host the Panthers at 4:05 for the first game at Allegiant for the year. I think the Raiders return home. They get back to their winning ways in a home opener, and they punish Carolina. I really think they're going to punish Carolina. Carolina, to me, and I have a ton of respect. That's an extremely knowledgeable fan base. As you know, I have reported this in the past. Carolina and Jacksonville are two franchises that have very underperformed. And it's really kind of sad because they have tremendous fan where they are in that part of the country. Really good fans. These are sleeping giant franchises that people around the league think could be big time franchises. If they could just get their ownership and administration and get the right thing in place, they could be good. But I think the Raiders punish Carolina and start out 2-1. Then week 4 is September 29th versus the Broncos. The Broncos come to Allegiant Stadium. The Browns, excuse me. I think the Browns defense is impressive, but I think the Raiders are better. And in this defensive battle, a late interception by the Silver and Black set up a winning touchdown from Michael Mayer. I just think that this is the way this game. I'm not sold on Deshaun Watson at all. And if you think it's because of the off-field troubles, that's not it. I'm just not convinced on him. I think that I think they were better last year without him. He's not a guy to me. I mean, again, I think the Browns way overpaid for him. They married their franchise to him, which was their mistake. It's just another ownership blunder. Can you imagine what Cleveland could be if they had good leadership? So again, I think that there's a lot in Cleveland. I'm not a Cleveland hater at all. In fact, I think Cleveland takes, like Detroit, takes a huge hit and gets ripped. And has made a lot of jokes of, but it's a great city. The people are great, incredible fan base. They just can't seem to get the football in order there. And I think that the Raiders get the big win and start 3-1. Then week 5, October 6th, they travel to the Broncos. And the Raiders will be flying high into Mile High. I mean, they're 3-1. They're going to be flying high. I think Sean Payton is a good coach. I have tremendous respect for him as a coach. Now, I said this when he was still with the Saints, and I say it again today. I don't think he's a great personnel person. I know some people in that organization that told me from time to time personnel decisions he wanted Mickey Loomis and he wanted the Saints to make, that they were like, what is he thinking? I think him putting his eggs in the Bo Nix basket was at the place that he picked him was ridiculous. I think it was smacked of arrogance. And I think the Raiders are going to smack them, and they're going to be 4-1 after that game. Then week 6, October 13th, the Raiders host the Steelers, and the Steelmen come to town. And same Russell Wilson, same results. I think the Raiders win at home against the Steelers. They've let 2 games in the Steelers. They're the playoff game they should have won. Then you may remember when the Steelers came to Allegiant and they lost a game they should have won. The Raiders are further along. I have so much respect for Mike Tomlin. I have so much respect for the Pittsburgh franchise, but I think the Raiders get him at home. Then you come to week 7, October 20th, at the Rams. I think this is going to be a really interesting game. And I think this is going to be a little bit of a slide for the Raiders. The Raiders enter the most difficult part of their schedule. They head back to Allegiant West but I have a lot of respect for Sean McVay, a ton of respect for Matthew Stafford. I like the Rams. Um, I mean that you saw last year with their resurgence. I think the Rams are going to be too much for the Raiders, and I think the Raiders lose in Week 7 to fall in 5-2. Then you come up to the Chiefs game. I think the Raiders, for some different reasons, but I think the Raiders come into the Chiefs game and it's very physical, um, very physical against the Rams, and I think they come into that Chiefs game beat up. I expect that Rams game to be a real tough game, very tough. And I think the Rams are a tough team. And I think the Raiders are. I just have this feeling there's going to be some injuries on that Raider team, and they're going to play Kansas City very well at home. But I think the injuries are going to be too much for them to overcome, and I think they fall at home to the Chiefs to fall to 5-3. Week 9, they go to the Bengals. And I think they're still going to be injured. They're still going to be, they're going to be frustrated. I really believe that because they had a chance to beat the Chiefs even when they weren't 100%, talking about the Raiders, and it slipped through their hands. They're going to go up and face a very tough Joe Burrow in the Natty. I think they lose 5-4. Then week 10 is a bye, and that's going to come at a great time because they've got to get healthy. I think they've got to get healthy in that bye week. I think they do come out week 11, though, at the Dolphins. Still not 100%. I think the Raiders have a valiant fight and again lose a tight ball game. I think the Raiders fall to 1-5 on the season in last second games, and they fall after the Miami game to 5-5. But here's where I think it starts to pick up again. Week 12, Broncos at Allegiant Stadium. Now healthy, the Raiders are back on course. They find their mojo, and who better to find it against than against a Bronco team? It's still an AFC West rival, but the Raiders come back. I think they get some guys back from injury, and it is powerful. And I think they dominate the Broncos for another season sweep and move to 6-5. Week 13 at the Chiefs, Black Friday. I think the Raiders are healthy. I think they feel like they have something to prove. They let the Chiefs game slip through their fingers at Allegiant. They know the nation's watching on Black Friday, and they want to send a message. And boy, do they. I think the Raiders get the win in Kansas City. Then that takes them to 7-5. Week 14, they go to the Buccaneers. They travel east. And I think that's just going to – there always is a couple games every year that you just kind of, I think where they're catching the Bucks, and I went and looked at the Bucks schedule, I think where they're catching them, I think they're after that losing streak, coming back and taking care of the Broncos. And then taking out the Chiefs with all the emotion of that game. I think they play their worst game at the Buccaneers. Excuse me. And I think they fall. That takes them to 7-6. Now, week 15, Falcons, Monday Night Football, Allegiant. I think the Raiders put on a show. On Monday Night Football, that'll be their second national game out of the last three. I think they make a statement, and it's going to be like for the Falcons. And I just think that the Raiders get a big win there, a very, very big win on Monday Night Football against the Falcons, and that takes them to 8-6. Then we come to Week 16, the Jags, and they're 8-6 at this point, 2 games above 500, and the Jags come to Allegiant. Now, the Raiders are a very young team. There's going to be a lot of young players on this staff and on this roster. And one of the things that I have shared with you before, Tom Izzo, the Hall of Fame basketball coach, at Michigan State is a very dear friend of mine. And Tom, once we were sitting in his basement and we were talking about building winning teams. Now, this is a guy over his career has gone to more Final Fours than anybody. Krzyzewski, Calipari, anybody. And he talked about how it's not just getting talent, it's young talent learning how to win. It's up up a couple of scores and 5 minutes to go and not trash talking. Understand, we just got to play to the whistle. Play to the whistle. Now, Izzo and Nick Saban who happen to be great friends, are two of the best in their collective sports of getting teams to understand that. Nick Saban, although it happens because it's part of having young teams, he rarely lost games like that. He had a great job of keeping guys focused to the whistle. Sometimes that doesn't always happen. I think the Raiders are a better team than the Jags, but I think some youthful mistakes cost them the game in week 16 versus the Jags at home. Then they go on the week 17 to the Saints. Now, I think the Raiders put on a show here. And I want to say something real quick because the Raider Nation is so divided over Derek Carr. I had a ton of email flood in. Great job, Hondo. Way to put Derek in his place when my article first published. Then I had a ton of email from people. You're just a Derek hater. Okay. Derek is my friend. I like Derek a lot. I think both teams want to win this game. It's just like when you play your brother in a card game or you play him in a sport. You want to play your brother. There is not the hatred and the animus that maybe is in the fan base. Well, not maybe. There isn't the hatred and the animus. Do I think both sides want to win? Yes. But I think this is bigger than Derek. I think I am not sold on the New Orleans Saints. I think Derek went to a situation where he could have went to some better teams. I was a little surprised that he picked New Orleans based on their situation. We'll just leave it there. Okay. Derek was hurt a lot of last year, and Derek also didn't play well last year. Did at times, but you can't mention him being hurt and then also not mention there were times he did play well. But the franchise to me is not a franchise in good condition. And I think the Raider defense, especially after that Jags loss, is just going to be. Listen to how I described it. Antonio Pierce and the veterans on the team have to say nothing. The young players know the mistakes that they made. And coming off that loss, I just think it's going to be brutal for New Orleans. That's not a week you want to be hosting the Raiders. And so the Raiders win that game, go to 9-7. Then they come to the final game of the year, and it's at Allegiant. And we don't know the date or time yet. It's to be determined. And they host a very improved Chargers team. I think the home crowd at Allegiant Stadium gets them over the top, and they finish 10-7 and head to the playoffs as a wild card team. Now, I could see a couple scenarios where that changes by a couple games. I could see some scenarios that they maybe get to 11 and 12 wins, and I could see some scenarios where they get to 9-8. So again, I think I always give you the low and the high. I think 9 wins is the low. If they get to 9, I think that's still an improvement. I wouldn't have an issue with that. I think 11 wins would be a terrific season. And I think 10 is still a good season. So I've got them going 10-7 at this point. And again, I reserve the right to change it. Now, there's a couple things in here that I want to point out to you. Number one, I do not believe that the Raiders roster is set. Not at all. I don't think the Raiders roster is set. I think there could be as few as one, maybe as many as 3 additions to this team between now and the start of the season that make the 53-man roster. Maybe as many as 3. I think 1 for sure. I think 3 could be a stretch, but I could see some scenarios where they get to 3 additional players on this roster. Okay, but then there's going to be injuries. Are they able to stay healthy during the preseason? There's going to be a lot done to make sure that happens, but you still have to be physical. You still have preseason games. There's been no announcement on joint practices, although this is not reporting anything as factual. I tend to believe there will be joint practices, but nothing's been announced and nothing at this point is written in stone. But I do think that there will be. Okay. And remember, the joint practices are far more important than the preseason games. Just exponentially more important than the preseason games. So want to keep your eye on all of that. I think there's a lot of things coming in here, going to be a lot of young players. Raiders had a very good draft. I just don't see the space at this point for all 8 players to make the roster. I think all 8 could, but then you got to look, okay, who doesn't make it? I mean, there's a lot of talent on this Raider team that, like McClendon Curtis last year, that I told you if the Raiders didn't keep him on the 53 man, he was not going to be able to stick around on the practice squad. I think there's some guys here that they're thinking, man, how do we hide him on the practice squad? And there are going to be some real discussions. We just can't. We just can't. And they're going to be looking at that strongly. But this is going to be a terrific camp. Don't forget, OTAs are coming up, which I said to you yesterday, they're optional team activities. I think they're officially called by the NFL organizational team activities, but they're OTAs, which are optional team activities, which is what they originally were. That's where they originally got the name. And they're optional, but I expect the Raiders to have, terrific participation. Mini camps coming up. There's a lot of really, really good stuff. I wanted to thank you very quickly for the response yesterday. Yesterday's podcast, I took you through what's going on. Had a ton of email from people thanking me. They had no idea about scouts scouting other teams, scouts scouting the Raiders, scouts, the writing of the playbook still going on. People had no idea about all that, and the response was tremendous. Also heard from some people about my comments about the film crew and all of that. So anyways, I appreciate hearing from all of you. Thank you for joining us again today. That's my prediction. Make sure you go check out the articles. Now, also, you can get those on the community page if you watch on YouTube, or you can just go to si.com/NFL/Raiders. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We appreciate you. Check me out on IG when you go to @HondoSR and X, formerly known as Twitter, when you go to @HondoCarpenter. Have a great day. God bless you.